I was in Austin about a month ago for not South by Southwest, but the crypto event before South by Southwest. So we went to this art exhibition one afternoon, and we're kind of out on a nice grassy area under a tree. It's beautiful. And so this girl starts walking around. She's like, "Hey, we're going to meditate," and we're all going to sit in a circle and meditate soon, and guided meditation. I said, "That's cool," and I'll be right here. And so after everyone got in the circle, right before we started, it's like, "Hey guys, I have some special crystals. Can I put them in the center of the group here? Can y'all help me charge these crystals?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, of course, brother." And so I pulled out my cell phone. I was like, "This has quartz and I think glass and I don't know, but I'm low on charge. Can you guys charge my phone for me?" Luckily, they were all like of good humor. They laughed and it was good. And then I quit being a dick and we actually meditated.
Nice. Yeah, all of the crazy like woo stuff that hippies are into is kind of like.
Wait, you're a hippie. You're part of the crypto hippie.
Exactly.
Right?
That was going to be my point. It's like
I
kind of like it because it's it's like how, I don't know if you guys have listened to how Jordan Peterson talks about religion, but it's all psychology, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's if you look at it that way, it doesn't matter really whether what you're believing is there is actually there. What matters is that you believe it's there.
No. It's not just psychology. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm a very condescending interruption. I mean, it's yes, it's psychology, but it's also philosophy and it's also physics, and then it's like also metaphysics. So it's like a combination of philosophy, psychology, and narrative. Yeah. So it's not just relativistic meaning, sort of because we share the meaning. There is some.
I'm not saying that there's no truth to it or no objective truth to it, whatever that means. But what I'm saying is that it is undeniable that there is something psychological going on, and that it by itself is a good enough motivation to believe in it.
I mean, I think a big difference between some of the New Age stuff and like some of these ancient religions like Christianity is like what Jordan Peterson would argue is like these older religions, like they've been vetted by time. So they've been around for they've survived for so long, and that in itself is kind of like recommends them in a way because they've proved themselves to be useful and applicable in all these different situations, and they've like picked up all this like wisdom and knowledge through like traveling through time. Whereas like some of this new stuff that's only a few years old, it could be the next best thing, like it could be way better than anything that's ever been before, but it hasn't been vetted in the same way, and it's not necessarily as rich. Well, I mean, they're not as rich as like these older traditions.
And have you guys ever read the book Antifragile by Nassim Taleb, where he talks about things that have been around for longer are more likely to be around for a lot
lot more? Yeah.
And so I don't know if you guys have read that book.
I haven't read it.
It sounds. It reminds me of past performance as a good indicator of future expectation, something like that.
Not exactly.
I listened to the audiobook. I don't remember that specific detail, but that sort of makes sense. Yeah.
And so the idea is that you can create things that are anti-fragile, systems, organizations that basically become hardened over time because they iterate. Things are tried, mistakes are made, errors are fixed, and then version 2.0 comes out, and it's better than version 1.0. And then 2000, fast forward 2000 years, you've got version whatever. Maybe it's not the most flexible thing, but it definitely has some kind of wisdom contained in it, which can help you inform your action. Maybe it's not a perfect roadmap. Maybe it's not a perfect instruction book, which is going to tell you exactly what to do in every situation. But it's going to say like, well, here's all the stuff here's the combined knowledge of past generation.
That's a difficult balance to walk in a lot of ways, because if society was just like it was 100 years ago, we could take all of that accumulated wisdom and really bank on it, right? It was like that's exactly how we should act, right? We respect our elders, all of these things. But in the kind of age that we're in now, where all of these changes are happening so quickly, these technological changes, right? The way that we live our lives, the earth is changing, society.
Hey, Ariel,
like
can you mute your microphone? Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute, right?
No, you forgot to mute, but just
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it. We were talking about the concept of this ancient wisdom that has been passed down over many generations, and we have it in text, we have it in story form, and the concept now is, how do we grab the good parts of that, the stuff that's timeless, right? The stuff that defines us as people, as humanity, and then how do we discard the traditions that might not be serving us any longer, right? There's a lot of things wrapped up in religion and rules. I like to call them the scribbles, the Bible, or the Constitution. I just call them the scribbles.
Constitution is fucking shit, sort of. I like the four. It's got some really good ideas. It didn't hold because, well, the Industrial Revolution, I think, is a good example of. We just touched on that example earlier, that we're moving out of the Industrial Revolution. We're ready into the information age, and the institutions that made the United States the most powerful, sort of successful government in society, probably in history. Maybe, I don't know if you could compare with the Greeks, definitely as far as accumulated wealth and technology and stuff, is also making it kind of creep. Like the boat is under pressure, right? Like there's like bolts shooting left and right. And it's in part because it's that old industrial, like it's not fit for purpose anymore. And as far as like in many ways, this the updating of the carcass, right? That's what this is, like Jordan Peterson talks about this. Like it's the one of the things that the youth brings to society is reevaluating all the things, but it has to be balanced with the old wisdom. And then that's the difference between the. Anyway, I don't want to get too metaphysical there, but the wise king and the dictator, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead.
One of the old things that survives is war, conquest in the military. Like people be like, oh, America is so great and wealthy because all of our democratic institutions. It's like, okay, partially, but the other part of that is military conquest. America was founded on military conquest and has continued to be prosperous on that level. We could talk about right and wrong and how it doesn't exist, but it also exists at the same time. Right, we could go a lot of directions with that, but I guess I just wanted to make that little point that a lot of our wealth has been based on war.
That is true.
Yeah, but it's not just war, right? I mean, it was the free speech, it was the gun rights, because the gun rights put a check on the government, except that the government has completely escaped that check. Well, I mean, not completely. It hasn't completely escaped it because there is a lot of sort of, I guess, the most well-armed civilian population in the world. I mean, maybe only comparative to like to Switzerland, right? As far as and then the whole free speech is obviously being tested right now, and Facebook and Google are trying to escape it and all that. But yeah, there's definitely this kind of like the police of the world problem.
Yeah, man, we should disarm the government. I'm all for disarmament. Let's start with government.
So I wanted to touch on something that Anthony talked about with basically we have some systems which are working for us, and we have other systems which are old. And actually, all you guys were talking about this, but there's some systems that are old that processes that we do that aren't serving us anymore.
Kidding.
And this is something I've been thinking about a lot. It's applicable to individual psychology as well, the same as all these other things that I've been talking about, where you pick up these habits as a kid. Maybe your parents yelled at you, or you had a bad experience doing something, and you learned this behavior which helped you out when you were a kid. And then when you became an adult, that it stuck with you, and it started causing problems for you down the road. And I think that the U.S. is very much like that, and a sort of society, large collective consciousnesses have the same thing. They have these traditions, some of which basically define us. You don't want to get rid of all of the traditions, because then you lose your identity, right? You just become something else, and I don't know, like that seems I don't know, not desirable.
Maybe fragile, right? Like you might become fragile because you are no longer standing on the strength that got you where you are, right?
Right.
And this is one of the things that I've debated with anarchists and libertarians lately too, is that it seems like there's this man, it's just, this is part of my disillusionment with the popular libertarianism, I'd say, is that people seem to think that the goal of life is freedom for freedom's sake, and then they get freedom and they just kind of devolve into hedonism, and it's just like let's fuck everybody, and let's do drugs, all kinds of drugs except heroin, and then go do.
And they never accept any responsibility.
Yeah, that's no responsibility for society. It's just escape society, go live in the jungle, or the most tolerable sort of the closest thing to it that's tolerable, and it's like, yeah, okay, I get the value of that in the short term. I mean, I've done it to some degree, even though I'm in the Bitcoin space, so I'm engaging society at that level. But it gets boring, and
it's not fulfilling.
It's not fulfilling.
Not ultimately fulfilling. And that's, again, this is what, going back to Jordan Peterson, like he talks about, if you want to start, having a meaningful existence, all you have to do is shoulder some responsibility. And this is something I've been like thinking about recently, like just kind of slowly just taking on more and more responsibility in society. And it makes sense to me that would be the most fulfilling thing. And of course it's the best thing for you and the best thing for society, because society, needs responsible adults to run it, to be kind of the rock.
Yeah, and what the rock is the rocks that defend freedom. So if the goal is to freedom for freedom's sake, then it seems to me logical that the goal is that you must prioritize defending whatever lets you keep that freedom. And that means to some degree engaging in society. And so if you just get out of the way, then society will just go wherever it would go if you're not there, and that's probably not a good place if you're freedom oriented. So yeah, you gotta fight for freedom in a sense, whatever that means. Doesn't mean we have to go to war or anything like that necessarily, but maybe it does, right?
I find it interesting that there's such a diversity of experience here on the earth. You can kind of experience anything you want. You could say that I have a belief in continuation of our consciousness, both before and after the life that we experience here in these bodies. But you can be born into a hunter-gatherer tribe. They still exist here on Earth, right? You can be born into an elite, top-level, lizard people or something like that. You can be born into wealth. You can be born into poverty. You can be born an athlete. Like this experience here is so just rich in diversity that if you want to fight for freedom, you can fight for freedom. If you want to be a Bitcoin crypto nomad, you can do that. What's really cool about the moment in time that we're at now, you can do anything you want. And
you can do both.
In a way, when you realize that, you're like, well, shit, what do I want? What do I actually want to do? I'm not doing. I can go fight for freedom, and it needs to be fought for. Or do I just want to go hang out in the jungle? I guess maybe all of the above. A little sample buffet of all the things of life.
Yeah, and it can also be inspire people through the use of freedoms in a way that's sort of kind of elevating, not just kind of various levels of masturbation, I don't know that I can think of any.
One big masturbation. Yeah. Life is masturbation.
Co-masturbation.
Yeah, I mean, anything can be fulfilling to that isn't fulfilling to you can be fulfilling to somebody else. It's really just up to that person to decide, whether they're masturbating or whether they're doing something meaningful.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, that's kind of the whole a bit of a postmodern idea, the idea that it's just up to each individual person to determine their own identity and their own desires and meanings in life. But I mean, Jordan Peterson kind of suggests with his philosophy that there's that meaning is to a certain extent constrained. That human flourishing is constrained by our history and our biology and the context we find ourselves in. It's the idea of archetypes, right? That there's these things there's these images that are kind of universally meaningful to all human beings, and that direct all of us, whether we acknowledge them or not.
Yeah, and
so one of the
definitely gone through
constraints might be one addition to that, one of the constraints might be that what society actually needs from someone, and whether somebody said this, I don't know who it was, like years ago, and it really clicked with me that peak meaning is where you're the thing you're best at meets the thing the world needs the most. I think it was Stephen Molyneux, and that's the limit in a sense, is what is actually needed by the world.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm excited about cryptocurrency is that, in my opinion, like I remember before cryptocurrency, I would look at governments and socioeconomic systems, and I would say, well, it's obvious to me what's wrong with all of these. The problem is that the collective interests are completely opposite from the individual interests. The individuals pursuing their own good are going to do stuff that's harmful to society. And cryptocurrency flips that on its head, and it takes the sort of vices of humanity and makes them beneficial to the system. That's what I love. That's what I love about Bitcoin. But I wanted to touch on something else.
Well, I'll comment on that. Like, one of the funny things about crypto is that there's a significant amount of fraud outside of Bitcoin, and even inside of the Bitcoin space, a lot of the Bitcoin exchanges have been caught in either frauds or scams or hacks. And so Bitcoin itself, I think, is probably the strongest, sort of most legit and honest and sort of actually.
But who are you to say that defrauding people is not helpful to the system? I think what that's doing is it's hardening the system, because when people get
okay, Mr. Vare,
they get mad.
And they're winning.
And then the bug that caused those people to get scammed, the gap in information or whatever, gets fixed. So I mean,
it may get fixed. It may also just like it may be that there's a fairly long wave of noobs, and the scammers are getting rich. So that could be problematic.
Chris to say is Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin.
I think Pepe Cash is the real Bitcoin. That's,
yeah. But no, I'm making fun of you, Chris, but you make a really good point. Like, without all the trials that Bitcoin has had and that crypto has had over the last 10 years, it wouldn't be where it is right now.
It's getting battle tested.
The concept of stress. And I think Ariel was talking about this at the beginning of the conversation, was that, we'd like to live a stress-free life, but we need a little bit of stress, the right kind of stress in the right kind of way.
And I remember what I wanted to say. I was going to touch on what Ariel said. You were saying there was kind of an objective component to what's fulfilling and a subjective component, or like I was saying it was subjective, and you were saying it was objective. I think it's kind of, like everything with truth, there's shades. There's basically things that we can kind of all agree are useful to society, and things that we can kind of all agree are not useful to society. And then there's a big gray area in between where it's your playground. You kind of get to define, out of that, which thing you're going to do and which thing is going to be.
Yeah, the way that the color spectrum works is actually, I think, a very good analogy to how life works in general, or at least what we're kind of talking about right now. You have black at one end of the spectrum, you have white at the other end of the spectrum, you have all the shades of gray, and then you have all the range of colors, and then you get to white again, right? So it goes black, grays, colors, and white. And that may be just the way that things are. Like, there is a black and white, but there's also a very rich, lots of colors in between.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's different levels, right? Like, it's like Jordan Peterson's whole thing is that on a certain level, there's this like meta story, or this archetypical story of like the individual being like born in the world of the known, and then traveling into the unknown, and finding something in the unknown for society and bringing it back. And that's like the hero's journey. And so that itself that's archetypical. That's like, I don't know if you call it objective, but it's definitely like trans-subjective. Like, it's like it on some deep way, it applies to all of humanity, and it's a way of telling the human story. But what the specifics of how that story specifically instantiates, like, varies from individual to individual, from age to age, from society to society. So it's, on a certain level, you call it objective, and then on another level, it's subjective. But it's I think the mistake is to kind of flatten it all into a subjective level, which I think
right. Which I wanted to clarify. I'm not trying to do that. Like,
I don't think you were doing that. Just
actually.